Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mastering Midlife, How to Thrive When the World Asks Most of You. I'm your host, Mark Silverman. I've been waiting to talk to my next guest on air for a couple of years. He's been a really good friend and supporter of mine for years, and I just love watching and learning from him. His name is Jason Goldberg. He's a self-professed geek turned tech CEO turned entrepreneur turned hip-hop artist. I think you opened for Wu-Tang Clan or something like that. I can't even say it because I'm such a Northern Jew. And now he's a transformational speaker. He's an author. He's a coach. He's a trainer. He blends this comedy and hip hop and just awesome accessibility with transformation and really serious subjects. He wrote a book called Prison Break, which I devoured, and it's the art of self-leadership. And that's why he's on the show. Jason, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. We got Silverman, we got Goldberg. We need like a Plattenstein or something. Like we need to like round out the precious metals.
That's so funny because on the baseball teams my sons were on, the high school baseball teams, they always yelled whenever he got a hit or was on base, Goldman. And I'm like, he's Silver. They're being funny. Right? It's endearing.
Yeah. Kids are so clever nowadays.
So cool. So let's get right into it. So the reason I want you to talk about self-leadership is because reading your book, knowing your backstory, watching you on, in your TED Talk and watching you on the stage talking about your backstory, and then seeing what you've accomplished, you're not a guy who went to a Tony Robbins seminar and decided, I want to help people. You're not a guy who read a book or went to a coaching class and hung his shingles. You're a guy who's been in the trenches, right? Depressed, unhappy, right? And did the work to get to be who and where you are. So bring us through a little bit of that, of why you do what you do, because I'm sure it's rooted in the pain of the past.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. It's actually, it's funny. Well, you know what? I'm gonna circle back to a conversation you and I had years ago at some point during this conversation, because it just came up as you were saying that. So, yes. So first and foremost, having done the work to be the person I am today, even for me, that isn't true for me because I'm continually doing the work. Like I am by no means immune to any of this. Like the best I can help for myself and for anybody that I work with is how to navigate this stuff, not how to be immune to it. And that was something that I think really plagued me a lot in the beginning when I was trying to like get out of depression and get out of anxiety and get out of like just, crippling sadness and anger and all these other things, was thinking that like there was something wrong with me, that I didn't just naturally know how to do this. And that's kind of like how I grew up. I grew up, if you grow up in a household where everybody speaks Spanish, you're not stupid if you don't know how to speak French. It just isn't the language you were brought up with, right? It doesn't mean you're like deficient because you don't speak French. So going back in time for me, growing up, I lived in a household where the predominant language, the fluent language we spoke, was prisoner. And for those of you who, you probably get it in context already, but the book Prison Break is all about this distinction of either at any given moment we can choose to be a prisoner of circumstance, where we kind of are at the whim of the economy, and we're at the whim of who's in the White House, and we're at the whim of the person who cut us off in traffic, and we're at the whim of the song on the radio that reminds us of our ex. And it's like we're just this like weak tree in the middle of a forest, just like hoping to God that we don't get blown over by the hurricane, right? And that's how I lived for like the first 30 years of my life, was like that was my default. There was no other choice. I didn't even know you could do anything else. For me, it was the people that were happy or could deal with difficult things in their lives. They were either completely delusional, had some kind of advantage that I didn't have, or they were heavily medicated. Like it just, to me, it wasn't something that was like available to a guy like me. Or,
somebody gave them the book that you didn't get. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The secret, right? Like and I don't mean the secret like the book, I mean, but like the secret sauce, right? And it's even funny, dude, because when I first, I want to talk about personal growth books in general. But anyways, going back to my story. So yeah, I grew up in prisoner mode the majority of my life. And it is the language that was spoken in my household. My mom has always done her absolute best. I don't blame her for any of this stuff. She brought to the table what she was taught. And that, and we always say, I know they always say parents are always going to screw up their kids just differently than the way their parents screwed them up. So my mom gave me so much love and so much, all these things that maybe she didn't feel as much of. But some of the crap still rolled downhill, and that was like this prisoner perspective. So I believed, And I was taught by example that when happy things happen, you're happy. And when sad things happen, you're sad. And so the goal in life is to either live as safely as possible so you don't have to deal with heavy stuff, or to manipulate and mold and modify all the people and all the things around you so that your life can be happy. And so that was my MO for the first 30 years was like,
right, but hold on, slow down. I just want to slow you down for a sec, because that's not unique to your family.
No,
that is no matter how woke we seem to think we are, even in the self-help industry, no matter where you are, if I get that client, I'll be happy. If I can pay this bill, I'll be happy. If I lose, you lost 130 pounds. When I lose 130 pounds, I'll be happy, right? Yeah. And it's ingrained in us, and it's every bit of advertisement is, if you get this car, you will feel this way. So we're all just, lab rats trying to figure that out. So your mom was just, and all our families were just trying to figure out how to give you whatever it is they thought you needed.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like it's not fully misguided. It's true. Like when I get the car, I'm happy for a little while. When I sign the client, I'm happy for a little while. And the funny thing is actually, I've never even thought about this until you just said that, is that the same is true and can actually be really freeing if we just take that little ending and put it on the heavy stuff too. When I don't get that client, I'm sad for a little while. Like, and like even just that alone is a huge shift to know that it's not permanent and pervasive.
Actually,
right?
that's pretty profound. Of all the years we've been doing this, I haven't heard that one. I love that.
Well, I like to say everything from ice cream cones to broken bones is temporary, right? So as much as you love your ice cream cone, it's going to go away. It's going to abandon you, right? And the same thing with broken bones. As much as the broken bone hurts, it's also going to abandon you. Everything is going to abandon you. Your body, your friends, your thoughts, your sadness, your happy times, everything's going to, and the sooner we realize that everything is fleeting and we don't have to attach to anything, then as the crap comes in, kind of be as grateful for the highs and graceful with the lows.
Got it.
So that's kind of what I've been trying to do, man. That's just my daily practice. So I had gone through all this stuff, and this is how I was, and I had my 6-word death sentence. My mantra that I used to say all the time is, that's just the way I am. So angry, depressed, 330 pounds, constantly stressed, whatever it is, that's just the way I am. No chance that I could change. It's in my DNA is what my belief was. And then
so that was your prison.
I had this moment, and this is in Prison Break, where that was my, and it still is. Like once in a while, I still throw myself into prison, but I'm both the captive and the captor at the same time. Right? Like I have thrown myself in the prison, and I have the keys just on my belt clip, and I'm complaining that I'm stuck and I'm locked away somewhere. When was
the first time, and by the way, everybody, I really appreciate you staying with this audio. I am on the side of a mountain with tenuous Wi-Fi. When did you know that you held the keys to your own prison?
When did I know? If I really track it back, I had started doing personal growth work when I had this what I say is the day the universe cut me off. And it's the first chapter of Prison Break, where I talk about this day where I tried to use my credit card to make a purchase, and the card was declined. And the reason it ended up being declined, I find out, and like I said, you can read the whole story in the book, was that there had been supposedly some fraudulent activity on the card. And the fraudulent activity the bank told me about that made them cut off my card was that there were 4 fast food transactions in one day. And so they assumed somebody must have stolen the card, and they were like testing it by making small purchases before going out and making some big purchase. And it wasn't fraudulent. I had I was making such terrible choices with my health and with my food that I had actually eaten at 4 fast food restaurants in a single day. And this is how I got to 332 pounds, is that life was very serious for me. I made everything significant, and food was a way that I soothed. Food was the way that I tried to feel enough and feel taken care of and feel like I could love myself. And so that was the big thing where I finally had this moment where I couldn't run away anymore, and I couldn't make excuses, and I couldn't blame my boss, and I couldn't blame my team, and I couldn't blame my spouse. I couldn't blame anybody for anything. I finally it was holy crap, dude, this is on you. You can't blame anybody else. And so that's when I started trying to reverse engineer the people that I had seen in my life, and people that were very close to me that had had very traumatic things happen to them. like truly traumatic things, like things that anybody in the free world would agree that's effed up. That shouldn't happen to somebody, right? That common belief here. And they were okay. Like their daily experience of life was way less stressful than mine. What do they know that I don't? And by talking to some of them, they said, oh, well, I got into personal growth, or I had therapy, or I got coaching. I started getting all these, this feedback from people. So I said, okay, I'm not going to coaching, therapy. That's too much for me. I'll read a book, right? I'll read a book. I'm fine with reading a book. So the first book I read, first personal growth book I read was Think and Grow Rich, which if you have never done any personal growth work before and you read that book, at least for me, I'll own my experience, was the most frustrating experience of my life. Because throughout the entire book, he's saying, by now you probably hear the secret that I've been sharing with you. And I'm like, no, just tell me the secret. Why do you keep teasing it? Why are you being such a snake oil salesman? And of course, what he was alluding to was the power of the mind to control our experience of life. But I didn't get any of that. So I read that, got super frustrated, kept reading, and finally stumbled upon Reinventing Yourself by Steve Chandler. And so going back to your original question, when did I realize I was in prison? It was when I had the realization that there was an alternative to being in prison. And that happened through me finding Steve Chandler's work and Reinventing Yourself. And then, of course, I started coaching with him. And that's how you and I are connected, is through that whole community. And that was really the first time where I said, that's interesting. I have way more control over my experience of life. Not control over my circumstances, but I have way more control over the experience of life that I have than I've been giving myself credit for.
Wow. Steve Chandler is the modern day Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Because, in Man's Search for Meaning, he talks from the visceral, he brings you into the concentration camps.
Yeah.
And he comes out with, we make our own experience, right? Steve Chandler, the most prolific writer and more value word for word than any other author I've ever read, gives us this, the same thing, Prison Break, victim, like that victim mentality versus an owner or a proactive or, agency. It's such a game changer to actually sit in that, I create my own experience. If you can actually sit in the uncomfortability of, I am creating this experience. I decided it shouldn't rain today. I decided I'm pissed I can't go to that picnic, instead of what's the opportunity. It seems so silly. But that's the key for me, that just changes the tide from victim, from prisoner, to now I'm free to actually go create.
Yeah, 1,000%. And the thing to be careful about there too, for anybody listening who, there's going to be one of two types of people typically who I'm guessing are hearing this message. One person who's hearing it and saying, oh, awesome. Yeah, I remember that. Thanks for the reminder. And that's great. You get this. And I hope it's like, oh, cool. Good. I'm back on track now. For the people who have not heard this before, or this is more of a foreign concept, what I don't want you to do from hearing this is take our invitation to take personal responsibility to be an invitation to take blame and shame. Not, I'm creating this. God, I'm such a piece of crap. Look what I'm doing to myff. Like,
so that's worth repeating. Either, right? That's worth repeating, because you cut out. So you don't want them to take on the guilt, the blame, that it's your fault that this stuff is happening.
Right. Now, if you're a Silverman or a Goldberg, it's going to happen for at least 20 minutes. You're going to feel guilty and shameful. But at minute 21, then I want you to shift from personal blame to personal responsibility, and the whole breakdown of like responsibility, the ability to respond. It's meant to be something that when you see this, it's meant to be an illumination, not a form of like destruction. It's not meant to like weigh you down. It's meant to lighten you up. And so that's kind of the perspective to look at, is that once you notice like, oh, wow, I am creating this experience, it's something where you say, cool. So if I'm that powerful to create that experience, what if I channel that power into something that actually serves me instead of something that
Can you give an example of that? Of, like when you say what actually serves me, I'm not sure people understand that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, it's like, so Byron Katie, and there's probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with Byron Katie. I know you are. And she has this thing called The Work. And the work is very simple. It's 4 questions you ask yourself to get free from any, beliefs that are weighing you down, and to really try to find the truth of the situations you're in. And one of her questions, she also has some sub-questions. And just really quickly, the questions are, is it true? Number 1, whatever belief you have in your head, this shouldn't be happening, or whatever it is. Number 1, is it true? And you have to answer just yes or no. Number 2, can you be absolutely certain that it's true? again, yes or no, causes you to go deeper and peel away another layer to see if your ego answered the first one or if your truth answered the first one. Number 3 is who are you? How do you show up in the world when you believe that thought, right? How do you react to the world? How do you feel about yourself? How do you treat yourself? How do you treat others? And the 4th question is, who would you be without that belief, right? Just for a moment in that situation, if you are not able to think that thought that this thing shouldn't have happened, for example, who would you be? How would your energy be? How would you treat yourself? How would you treat others? And one of her sub questions for question number 3, who are you when you believe this thought, is, does the thought bring you peace or stress, right? Or said another way, can you think of one stress-free reason to continue holding on to this thought? So when I'm talking about, does this thing serve me or not, a very simple way to look at this is, does holding on to this thought bring me peace or stress? And there's nothing for you to do necessarily with that. Just ask yourself the question, does it bring me peace or stress? And if I say that brings me stress, then the question becomes, well, then why would I keep holding on to it? What's the payoff? There is some payoff. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't get and that I've had to get for myself. Nobody would consciously choose to be upset, anxious, depressed, sad. Like, there's no rational human being that would wake up in the morning and say, I think depression feels like a good thing for the menu today. I think a day of depression is exactly what I need. Nobody would rationally do that, but there's some kind of payoff. And so for me, I had to recognize that me being a prisoner, me being a victim, got me love. It got me sympathy. It had people feel sorry for me. And so I felt held, I felt seen, I felt heard. There's a payoff. So the first thing I want to recognize is it does actually serve me to be a prisoner sometimes, but is the payoff worth the cost? Right? Is the payoff worth the cost? So when I really dive deep in and say, does this actually serve me? Like, based on how I want to feel, based on what I want to create, is me holding on to this thought bringing me closer to or taking me further away from this thing that I want to feel? If that makes sense.
Right. And then the little aha that I think about in that conversation that you just had is that you actually have some control, I'm not sure that's the word, of whether or not to believe a thought, whether or not to hold on to a thought. And that takes practice. Like this, maybe you can be struck free of this, but it takes practice to question each thought, when people do Byron Katie's the work, they do it for months on a piece of paper before they ever walk into a situation and automatically run through it in their head and let go of the thought. So all of this stuff is hard fought, hard won, because we're wired from such a young age that undoing the wiring takes the work.
It does take the work. And one of the distinctions that I try to use with this stuff when it comes up for me, and I mean, I share this with clients, but anything I share with clients, probably the same with you, is not something you built intellectually. It's something you built out of necessity for yourself, most likely. At least for me, it's that way. And one of the distinctions
and continues to be.
Yeah, fully. Like, I mean, there are chapters in my book. There's one chapter in particular that I go back to in my book probably once a month because I need the reminder. Right? I wrote the damn thing, right? I should know this stuff. And for everybody watching who thinks you should know it, you should have it all figured out, you should have your crap together, it's a BS notion. Nobody has their crap together. Nobody has it figured out. There's a lot of people on the internet that will make you think that, but they are lying through their teeth. And I probably look that way sometimes too, and I try my best to share the shit I'm going through, but maybe it doesn't always come through, but nobody has their crap figured out. So release that as a goal because it doesn't exist. But as things are coming up, one of the distinctions I like to look at is interesting versus helpful, right? Interesting versus helpful. So a thought pops in my head and says, you're not good enough. A thought pops in my head and says, you should have it all figured out. A thought pops in my head and says, that person shouldn't have done what they did, whether it's cutting you off in traffic or shutting down your idea during a meeting at work. And I ask myself, is believing and attaching to that thought, is it actually helpful? Or is it just because, like, the whole Kardashian saga, very, very interesting, not very helpful, right? So it's great to, like, there are things in the world that are very interesting and, like, it's fun to, like, dive in and excavate and be like an archaeologist and find out where it came from and all that. But is it really helpful in moving me forward? So that's one of my kind of filters for things, is when the thought comes to my head and I believe it or I attach significance to it, is doing that helpful, or is it just an interesting distraction for me not to look at truth?
Cool. Strange question has been popping into my head for the last 10 minutes. Yeah. So when you're done with all this, and when you either decide to retire or die,
Wait, am I deciding to die or I've just died?
I don't know. There's different theories on this, but
Okay.
what do you want your gift to the world to be? What do you want people to be left with because you lived?
Yeah, this is so okay. So can I say something else before I answer that?
You can do whatever you want.
Okay, cool. I'm going to start stripping. You and I had a conversation a few years ago. It's probably maybe 3-4 years ago. I'm not even sure how long ago it was. And we were talking about our whys, right? And you were saying how your why brought tears to your eyes. And I said that I didn't have a why that did that, and I was okay with that. And you and I got into a really like spirited kind of debate around it, and it was great. It was an awesome exchange. Like it really had me like look at my stuff. And I didn't really feel that. And I still felt my why was valid, but I didn't feel like I cried. I would cry about it if it wasn't fixed. I'd say about 2 years ago, that actually shifted. And what I realized is that I cannot stand, and this is, and I don't even know what to do about it most days. I cannot stand to see people suffering. It absolutely tears me apart to see people suffering. It can be actors on a TV show, or it can be real people out in the world. I cannot stand to see people suffering. And the time where I really got this and where it really hit home for me was I was watching Jim and Andy, the documentary on Netflix about Jim Carrey doing the Andy Kaufman movie, the Man on the Moon movie. And Jim tells this story, which I've now heard him tell in a bunch of other places, but this is the first time I heard him tell it, where he realized sitting in his bedroom in LA one night after he had been a professional comedian now for something like 10 years and was questioning why he was doing all this stuff. Well, I get it. I make people laugh. But why am I actually doing this? And he said he realized that his purpose on this earth was to free people from concern. That was it. He just wanted to free people from concern. And when I heard that, I immediately started crying. Because I realized that's my purpose, right? To activate joy, to free people from concern. And that's why I now have this, like my entire business plan is one line, and it's to leave everybody I meet with at least 5% more joy than I found them. At all costs, full stop. I don't give a shit if it kills me in the process. I am going to free as many people from concern as possible. So if I die one day and people say, that Jason Goldberg lightened me up, that Jason Goldberg gave me 5% more joy, 5% more hope, 5% more optimism, I don't care if it's through coaching or speaking or being a Starbucks barista. If I can leave people with that feeling and that feeling of activated joy in their life, I'm good, man.
So yeah, you may not cry about that. You just had me in tears. So, it's so, I'm so appreciating this conversation because I feel a lot of emotion talking to you today because I feel like I have vulnerable Jason. I have real Jason with me today. And I feel that, right? Because I know your mission. I've known your mission since I met you because you live it, right? Even when you didn't know, you live it constantly. How do you help people find there, like what questions do you have people ask themselves to find that for themselves?
So for me, it's not so much about finding a thing, right? Like finding a thing that lights you up. Like one of my favorite quotes, and it's the guiding principle for the work that I do, is the Howard Thurman quote: "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and then go do that, because what the world needs is more people who will come alive." And so I believe that it's actually not my job to help people figure out what it is that makes them come alive. I believe it's my job to lighten people up in general so that the opportunity to find out what makes them come alive presents itself. So for me, the thing that I'm always pointing back to, the questions that I'm asking are always questions around, is there a possibility that you're taking this thing even 5% too seriously? Right? Is there a chance that if you had a 5% more casual relationship, we have, and I'll speak for myself, I sometimes have a very serious relationship with my thoughts. Like we're married, we have a summer home in Catalina Island. Like it's very serious, Mark. It's very, very serious. And instead, I want to have like a Tinder relationship with my emotions, right? I can swipe left, I can swipe right. We may hook up, we may never see each other again. Totally cool. So if I can have people have a 5% more casual relationship with their thinking, then the rest takes care of itself.
Oh my God, that's so good. So I knew you would have a different answer than anybody else about something like this, because it's usually pretty heavy. If I think lightening people, lightening people up, is about as good a passion as anybody could possibly have, given what we deal with every single day.
Yeah.
So what's cool? What's coming up for you that you're really excited about these days?
I'm in this really interesting place. I mean, you want real vulnerable JG. That's what you're getting. Like, I'm in this really fun place where like the business is doing amazing. It's like growing like crazy, year over year. And we're helping all these people and it's wonderful. And I know there's an even higher contribution for me. That's more for the masses. That's more mainstream. And I am personally doing the opposite of what we just said. I am putting a lot of significance and having a very serious relationship with what that's going to look like. And so my work right now, like literally like as we speak, like this week, and I actually have time booked out very soon towards the end of the year to do more work on this, is to have a more casual relationship with my vision and allow things to come in without having this significance attached to it, that it has to be the perfect thing, that it has to be, that I have to know the exact medium, I have to know the exact form, the exact, like I need to know all the things and instead just play. And it was so funny, man. I went to this event last night. You're familiar with Jay Shetty, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Jay had a live event last night in LA. And so we had these cards that he gave us, and the cards said to be on them, right? And we were supposed to write like who we want to be in these different situations. He guided us through a few things. And then at the end, he had us do this really funny thing where they basically became like values. And we had 4 cards. And he had us rip all the cards in half, right? And then like mix them all up and like trade them with other people and mix them all up again. And he did this whole thing. And he's doing this thing where he's like, okay, now take one of the pieces and say, I am. And like, we're not looking at what they are. We have them face down now, so we can't see anymore what they are. He says, take one of the cards and say, I am, and then put it on the bottom of the deck. And then take the next one and say, I am not, and put it away. And he's like having us do all this mix up stuff. And then it comes down to where we only have 2 little slips left. And he basically says to the audience, now cool, turn them over and you'll be able to see the semblance of the word, even though it was in half. And he said, now you have 2 different values for you to focus on going forward, right? That's your 2 things to focus on going forward. Well, when I did this thing, it was fully random, dude, like switching with neighbors and throwing stuff away and everything else. When I had my final 2 and I put them together, it was back to the same word that it was, which says performing.
To be performing.
Yeah. So after all that, I didn't have 2 different sheets of paper. It came back to the word reconnected itself, even after all that.
All right, that's freaky.
It's super freaky.
By the way, if you're listening on the podcast, Jason is holding up the paper cut in half that says to be performing. Absolutely incredible. So what does that mean to you now?
So that's the nudge from the universe that I need to not overthink. I need to, so performing, right? Notice also very, very interesting, very spiritual, universal stuff. It doesn't say perform. Perform's a noun. Right now, I guess perform's a verb. Performing, though, is like a very clear verb, right? Performing, like be in action. Not like, it's not a label. It's not performer. It's not to be a performer. It's to be performing. It's to be engaging with life and testing and trying things out. And so I've been having a bunch of these nudges lately to say, screw the format. Don't worry about the label. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Get engaged with life on this level, and the rest will take care of itself. And so for anybody that's listening to or watching this, if there's a thing you want to create, stop attaching to what it needs to look like at the end and start engaging with life. Because these things don't develop and emerge and unfold by writing journal entries down for 6 months. Just like in a science lab, when the scientists are like drawing out different math equations, or like they're trying to put a man on the moon and they draw out all the things and they have all the equations on the board, none of that means crap until they go and test the math out in the real world. Right? Nothing was created on paper. It's created in the real world. So fine, do some journaling, do some soul searching, do some introspection, get some notes on paper, but then go engage with life. And so that's what this was for me. It's another nudge to go engage with life on this new thing.
What would stop you from achieving whatever it is life is nudging you towards?
Having an attachment to what it looks like, trying to find a finite answer to an infinite question.
Right. So a tight grip on that vision that your mind is coming up with instead of letting it evolve naturally.
Yeah, you nailed it. Tight grip is probably the perfect way to say it, is to loosen my grip on the idea of what I'm creating. That's a perfect way to say it, Mark.
Beautiful. I think I'm blessed with not having a really strong vision of a tangible thing to build, and people bring it into my life constantly. I just got off the phone with my ex-wife, and she was talking about Jay Shetty, and she's like, you're just like Jay Shetty, and you should be all over this, and you should be on this, and you have that charisma, and like you could be Jay Shetty for the older crowd, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be Jay Shetty. But she says, you should go speak here and you should go do, and then other people say, your business should be this way and it should be multi-million dollars, and then you should create this. And like all of that falls right off of me, because the only thing I can think of for myself is to serve who is in front of me. Right now, on one hand, that's awesome. On the other hand, it's a little bit of a cop-out, because for me, for a stretch is actually to now start engaging with a thing to build in the world, right? So you're trying to loosen your grip on yours. I'm actually trying to solidify mine a little bit more to start to work towards, right? I'm 57 years old. My mind and the world will tell me, Mark, you really need to get your shit together and make something at this point. So that I'm dealing in the tension of that. Of just letting life decide and also creating something intangible. But the thing that you said was, what I notice is miracles. I'm a rabid introvert. I never even knew how much I want to be alone. My fish, my dog, I'm good, right? Yep. A pad and paper, I'm a happy guy. And here I am on video all the time. I'm on stages. But going out in the world and engaging with people is where the magic happens. Mm. Right? For me, it's so ironic. Magic happens every time I step outside of the house, and I never want to step outside of the house. So I make myself, I schedule things to be outside of the house to create that magic, and get outside of what my brain wants. So
and I really truly believe, like, I'm such a, like, I'm a weird person when it comes to like the whole spiritual universal thing. I call myself a spiritual pragmatist, right? So like, I met was at one point, and she said that the way she looks at me is that I'm half woo and half do. And I love that, because it's like half, half like spiritual, let the universe do its thing, and half like get super engaged and do the thing. And what I've noticed is like, there's that quote, and I don't remember who says it. It's William something, but about like, once you purposefully decide, like, providence moves and all the things happen for you. And like, I really do believe that. And the more and more that I'm priming myself to see examples of where this stuff can happen, the more people are just being flooded into my life. And I remember last night actually driving, and yet again something happened where I was at a party, like a house party thing, dinner party thing, and there was this woman that I saw. I literally said hi to her, didn't say anything else to her at all. She was with some other people that I know, and we had no connection whatsoever. Somehow she finds me on Instagram. She looks me up on Instagram, messages me saying, hey, we didn't really get to connect. We should chat. So we connect and we chat, and we end up seeing each other at another event a week later. And then I see her driving past me on my street. And I text her. I'm like, oh, hey, I just saw you on my street. She goes, oh, I live on that street. I was like, where do you live? And she literally lives directly across the street from me. And she's working with Will Smith directly, who is one of my idols and somebody who I'd love to have in my world. And this person's literally 1,000 feet away from me as we speak. So it's like, when I start engaging with life and I'm purposeful about, this is what I want to create in some sense, I don't know what it looks like directly, but in some sense, this is the kind of circle I want to be involved with. The stuff does start coming into our world, but we got to be on that frequency to receive it. And that's what I'm continually working on.
Beautiful. Jason, thank you for just sharing your heart and soul. The book is Prison Break, by the way. It is like having a conversation with Jason. It's an easy read as far as time and length, but it's confrontational. Like, you'll learn a lot about yourself in that book. So I really appreciate it. I'm going to put links to everything from Byron Katie to your quote to your book and everything in the show notes, and how to get in touch with you at your website. Jason, thanks again for being with us.
My pleasure, Mark. Always great to talk to you, bro.
And to everybody else, I just so appreciate your time and your precious attention. I love you, and have a great rest of the day.